America's Kurdish allies in Syria are accusing the United States of turning its back on them following Donald Trump's abrupt decision to pull US troops out of northern Syria. Now, I say that it's abrupt because it certainly was. There was no real explanation given as to why Donald Trump made this decision. But what we do know is that he made this abrupt decision immediately following a phone conversation he had with the Turkish president, Erdoğan. Now, the US has more than 1,000 troops deployed in the region, and they're currently, or they were, working closely with our Kurdish allies there in the fight against ISIS. However, now it turns out that the US troops will be pulled out because of Trump's decision. Now, American forces will not support or be involved in the operation, and United States forces, having defeated the ISIS territorial caliphate, will no longer be in the immediate area. This was a statement released by the White House just recently, and also the Associated Press is reporting that Trump's abrupt decision to stand aside infuriated Kurds who stand to lose the autonomy they gained in the course of Syria's civil war. The Turkish president Erdoğan said American troops have started pulling back following his conversation with Trump the night before.
All right, lots to say about this, and this is not an easy issue. A lot of people are painting it as easy, it isn't. There are certain things that are easy. The manner in which Donald Trump made the decision is, as usual, mental. Without consulting our own Pentagon, without going through any kind of deliberative process, and actually apparently upending one that upset a delicate balance that they had struck in the first place, as usual. So Trump's actions crazy, right? In the way that he did it. Now, why is it complicated overall? Well, progressives, including myself, we want troops out of Syria in general. On the other hand, those 1,000 troops that we had in northern Syria, in essence protecting the Kurds, well, those were probably the last ones I would have pulled out. And so why? Well, that's also complicated. So on the one hand, the Kurds helped us tremendously in fighting against ISIS. On the other hand, the Turkish government is very against some of the Kurdish forces that they think are part of the separatist movement in Turkey, and they call them Kurdish terrorists. And Turkey is not an enemy of ours, although that would make Donald Trump more likely to support them probably, but they are the second largest army in NATO, and they're critical to anything we do in the Middle East. So now that means that you have to be very concerned about Turkey's concern about Kurdish terrorists, right? But at the same time, you don't want to betray the Kurds who just helped you fight ISIS in Syria. So what you need is a really smart president that could thread that needle. That is not what we have. Unfortunately, that is not the direction the United States of America has gone. But look, one big clear takeaway is we told the Kurds we'd have their backs. And now for the 100th time in a row, a large Western power has lied to the Kurds and betrayed them again. And if you don't know the history of it, the Kurds are constantly betrayed by the Western powers. They help them in whoever they're fighting with at the time with big promises about, oh, once we're done with this, we're gonna help you and we're gonna have your back. And as usual here, Donald Trump, and hence, unfortunately, the United States of America, has said to the Kurds one more time, no, we were lying. We're now gonna let the Turks roll into your territory and do whatever they want.
Yeah, so let me give you more details on that, because the conflict between the Kurds and the Turks is a serious conflict, and there are already some provoking statements made by the Turkish government. They want to create something known as a safe zone. Don't let the title mislead you or the label mislead you. This is not a safe zone. Essentially what Turkey wants is to encroach on Syrian territory and do away with the Kurds that live near the Syrian-Turkish border, right? And so let me give you the details on that. Turkey has pushed for this safe zone that would remove Turkish forces from the pocket of Syrian territory nearest to Turkey. The US has instead been working on establishing a security mechanism with the Kurdish allies, right? So now Trump has completely reneged on that promise of creating this security mechanism, and he's allowing for the Kurds to fend for themselves. Understandably, following the Kurds helping us in Syria, they're very upset. So here are some statements from the Syrian Democratic Forces. The American forces did not abide by their commitments and withdrew their forces along the border with Turkey. We will not hesitate for a moment in defending our people against Turkish troops. So Cenk, can you elaborate a little more on why Turkey sees the Kurds as terrorists? Because they're being linked to the PKK in Turkey?
Yes. So the PKK is recognized internationally as a terrorist group. It's Kurdish separatists in Turkey. So now, both illegitimate Kurdish actors in Turkey, i.e. people who've committed terrorism, and legitimate Kurdish citizens of Turkey are concerned that they don't have the full rights of Turkish citizenship. Now, the government of Turkey swears up and down that that isn't true, and there are a lot of Kurdish politicians that ascend all the way to the top leadership in Turkey from time to time. But that is a very real and important issue, and yes, there is a lot of violence around that. So the Kurds, the PKK does terrorist acts within Turkey, and then the Turkish government does tremendous state violence against some pockets of Kurdish areas in Turkey, as the government of Israel, for example, does state violence. So that state violence should not be ignored. It's not just, hey, the terrorists are bad guys, and then when the state comes in and rolls in tanks and fires at citizens and civilians, it's no big deal. No, there are no clean hands here either way. Now, PKK, if you believe the Turkish government, the US government, etc., they're bad guys, okay, that's easy. But what's not easy is, well, they're intermeshed with the Syrian Defense Forces, which are also Kurdish, which are near the Turkish border, right on the Turkish border, that have helped the United States of America fight against ISIS. So are the Syrian Defense Forces purely good guys? Syria is a mess. What does it mean to be a good guy? What does it mean to be a bad guy? I do know they helped us fight ISIS. That's pretty good. And we made a promise to them. And breaking that promise is terrible.
It is terrible, especially considering future conflicts where we might need allies. This isn't just about the Kurds; it's about what it messages to the rest of the world. If the United States is going to use any group of people and then renege on its promises, why would any group want to help us with what our objectives are abroad?
100%. Look, next time we go into a conflict and we tell a local group, hey, don't worry, we got your back afterwards, they'll never believe us, and they'll be right not to believe us. And you know what that does? That endangers our troops more than almost anything you could do. And so, look, now there's more implications in this. I just want to be clear about what it means to let Turkey do this incursion. There's a lot of euphemistic talk. They would be invading Syria,
right?
And they would march their troops those 20 to 30 miles, depending on which report you believe. And the safe zone means, no, we now have this territory. Yeah, and maybe technically the United Nations is not going to call it Turkey, but we're going to control that area, or we're going to occupy that area. And the Turkish government would say, so that the terrorists don't strike us and they're not on our border. The Kurds would say, no, so that you could have our territory, which is most of the territory Kurds have within Syria. So I think an occupation is probably a fair way to describe what'll happen next. But in order to occupy, first you got to roll in the tanks. So that's what's coming in first. When you roll in tanks, when the Kurds say we're going to defend ourselves, well, of course they are. Of course they are. So Trump is saying, no, there won't, I'm telling Turkey, we'll get to that later. Oh, I'm telling Turkey they better not do anything wrong. What does that mean? Do anything wrong with what, tanks? Yeah, they're gonna do something wrong with tanks as in fire them. When the Kurds say, we do not agree to you taking our territory. So this is potentially a giant mess that Trump has created. God knows why, by the way. I mean, let's talk about that for a second.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So he says, oh, it's because the Turks are gonna take the ISIS fighters off our hands because we have all these ISIS fighters. Again, reports range anywhere from 10,000 to 60,000 ISIS fighters that we've captured. And some of the countries, like the European countries that some of them originated from, have said they're not going to take them back. They're not going to detain them. Trump's very upset about that. So Erdoğan comes in and goes, oh, I'll take them. And Trump's like, oh, okay, great, we have a deal. Now, I'm not convinced that's the real deal, okay? But if that was the real deal, then Donald Trump is a total idiot. You know why? Because America doesn't have those ISIS fighters. You know who has them and who's detaining them? The Kurds, the Syrian Defense Forces. They actually have them in their jails. Now, do you think that the Kurds, after being invaded by the Turks, are gonna be like, oh right, Donald Trump, who just betrayed us, told us to hand over the ISIS fighters to you guys. Well, of course, we'd be happy to do that. I mean, the fact that he doesn't know that is unreal. If you put aside every other part of this that's nuanced. The fact that he doesn't know we don't have the ISIS fighters, the Kurds do, and of course the Kurds are not gonna give the ISIS fighters to the people invading them. How could you not, if that's the essence of the deal and you think, no, Trump's on the level and he made this deal, then you actually think Trump is dumber than I think he is.
I don't trust any deal that Trump makes at this point, especially when he makes abrupt decisions immediately following a phone call with a foreign leader. So he's in the middle of this impeachment investigation because of the fact that he's hitting up foreign leaders, asking for favors that help him personally and politically, right? And so what happened in that phone call with Erdoğan? Why did he make this decision? What type of favors were exchanged, if any favors were exchanged? I just think that this is incredibly suspicious. And yeah, I mean, is Trump an idiot? Does he know the nuances of this situation? Does he care to be briefed on these foreign policy issues? No, of course he doesn't want to be briefed. He doesn't care. The only time Donald Trump cares about anything is when it benefits him personally. Right? And so that's why I think it's important to have a real clear understanding of what happened in that phone conversation.
I don't know if they've already put it in the secret server.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's hard to know what in the world Erdoğan could have promised Donald Trump. There is a Trump Tower in Turkey. I don't know. Okay, now let me tell you what we do know for sure. Let me go to graphics 11 and 12 here. This is Trump's special envoy in charge of fighting ISIS. He resigned recently because Donald Trump is mentally unstable and he couldn't believe the irrational decisions he was making and how he was betraying our allies left and right. So now he weighs in on this. His name is Brett McGurk. Remember, this was Trump's special envoy to fight ISIS, okay? He says, the White House statement tonight on Syria after Trump spoke with Erdoğan demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of anything happening on the ground. The United States is not holding any ISIS detainees. They're all being held by the SDF, that's the Syrian Defense Forces, which Trump just served up to Turkey. So it's not me saying it, it's Trump's own special envoy whose job was to fight ISIS that's saying it. Okay, one more tweet from him. You should read all of his tweets. They're all devastating in how they show the details of how Trump does not understand one thing happening on the ground. Okay, he says Turkey has neither the intent, desire, nor capacity to manage 60,000 detainees in Al-Hol camp, which State Department and Department of Defense Inspector Generals warn is the nucleus for a resurgent ISIS. Believing otherwise is a reckless gamble with our national security, which leads us to one more aspect of this. It's possible that the Kurds are like, oh, you're really concerned about those 60,000 ISIS fighters that we helped you capture. We did most of the work and we lost lives capturing those people. When we talk about work, it's not like they were digging trenches. They lost their brothers and sisters capturing those ISIS fighters, right? But now it turns out it was all for nothing from their point of view. So they're gonna have two incentives. One is, oh, Turkey, again, the country about to invade us, would like these ISIS fighters. Maybe we release them and see what happens. Then you'll have the ISIS fighters and you'll have to fight them, okay? So that's one possibility. I'm not saying the Kurds are gonna do that, but that's certainly on the board. And number two is, well, Kurds are out of allies. So the Turks are coming for them. Trump just betrayed them. There's no Western powers left. So who's the only one that can help them with Turkey? Syria, Bashar al-Assad. the dictator they were fighting in the first place. They remember how the civil war started? Before ISIS got involved and made an even bigger mess of it, a lot of different factions inside Syria were fighting against the dictator, Bashar al-Assad. But now the Kurds are gonna go, well, I got nothing left. I gotta go to Assad. Otherwise the Turks are gonna run right over me, right? So, and by the way, who's Assad working with? Iran. So if you, and this is, by the way, this is also really, really important. Part of the reason why the national security apparatus and the Republicans are freaking out right now is because this strengthens Iran, and Israel hates that. So our defense contractors hate that, Israel hates that, Saudi Arabia hates that. So these are all of our allies for what they're worth, right? And so they're like, what have you done? What have you done? Now the Kurds are all gonna flip and work with Iran. That hurts Saudi Arabia and Israel. That's why their hair is on fire. This is the one thing that the Republicans are not backing Trump on. They're all over Fox News, including Kilmeade and everyone else screaming bloody murder. Why? Because he's hurt Saudi and Israeli interests. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.